James Parker had everything a man could want. At 35 years old, he owned a big tech company worth billions of dollars. He lived in a huge house by the ocean. He drove fancy cars that cost more money than most people make in 10 years. His clothes were made just for him. Famous people wanted to be his friends. But James was not happy. When he came home to his big, empty house each night, no one was there to greet him. He had dated many beautiful women, but none of them cared about the real James. They only wanted his money and to be seen with someone famous. James's mother, Martha, worried about her son. She was 70 years old and very sick with cancer. The doctors told her she had only 1 year left to live. More than anything in the world, Martha wanted to see her only son married and happy before she died. One Sunday evening, James went to have dinner with his mother. Their family cook, who had been with them since James was a baby, made all his favorite foods. But James noticed his mother barely touched her plate. "Mom, you need to eat to keep up your strength," James said, reaching across the table to hold her thin hand. Martha smiled weakly. "I'm not very hungry these days." She took a deep breath. "James, I need to ask you something important." James put down his fork. "Anything, Mom. You know that." "I want to see you married before I go," Martha said, her eyes filling with tears. "I want to know you won't be alone. I want to hold my grandchild, even if just once." James felt his chest tighten. He hated seeing his mother cry. Since his father died 10 years ago, it had just been the two of them. She had always supported his dreams, even selling her wedding ring to help him start his company when no one else believed in him. "Mom, I haven't found the right person yet," James said gently. "All the women I meet just want my money." Martha squeezed his hand. "I don't care who she is, James. Rich or poor, beautiful or plain. I just want someone who will love you for you." James looked at his mother's face. The cancer had taken away her once beautiful looks. Her skin was pale, her cheeks hollow. But her eyes still shined with the same love they always had. "I'll find someone," James promised. "I'll get married within 3 months." His mother's face lit up. "Do you mean it?" "I do," James said firmly. "I'll find someone to marry. For you." The next day, James went to visit his mother at the hospital. She needed to stay there now because she was getting weaker. As he walked down the long white hallway carrying flowers, he heard his mother laughing. It was a sound he hadn't heard in months. James stopped at the door. Inside, he saw a nurse with her back to him. She was telling his mother a funny story as she checked the machines connected to her. "James," his mother called when she saw him. "Come meet Emma. She's my favorite nurse." The nurse turned around, and James tried not to show his shock. Emma's face was covered in burn scars. One side of her face was badly damaged, pulling down her eye and twisting her mouth. Her hands were also scarred. She was what most people would call ugly. But then Emma smiled at James, and he noticed she had kind eyes, warm brown eyes that crinkled at the corners. "Your mother is my favorite patient," Emma said in a soft voice. "She shows me pictures of you every day." James watched as Emma gently fixed his mother's pillow and helped her sit up. He saw how carefully she handled his fragile mother, how she anticipated her needs before Martha even spoke them. And an idea began to form in his mind, a way to make his mother happy in her final days. Over the next 2 weeks, James visited his mother every day at the hospital. Each time, he found himself looking forward to seeing Emma, the nurse with the scared face. James noticed how other people acted around her. Some looked away quickly. Others stared when they thought she wasn't looking. A few doctors spoke to her in loud, simple words, as if her scarred face meant she couldn't understand normal speech. But Emma never seemed bothered. She moved through the hospital with quiet confidence, always kind to everyone, even those who were unkind to her. One afternoon, James arrived to find his mother asleep. Emma was checking her vitals. "She's had a rough day," Emma whispered. "The pain was bad this morning." James felt helpless. "I wish I could do something." "You are doing something," Emma said. "You're here. That matters more than you know." They walked together to the small garden area behind the hospital. James was surprised by how easy it was to talk to Emma. She didn't try to impress him or mention his wealth. Instead, she asked about his childhood, his dreams, and books he liked to read. "My favorite is The Little Prince," she told him. "Have you read it?" James shook his head. "It says, 'The most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or touched. They are felt with the heart.'" James thought about those words for a long time after he left. The next day, he brought 2 cups of coffee to the hospital. Emma looked surprised when he handed her one. "How did you know I like it with cinnamon?" she asked. "I pay attention," James said, feeling proud that he had noticed this small detail about her. As days passed, James found himself thinking about Emma when he wasn't at the hospital. He wondered what she did in her free time. Did she live alone? Did people stare at her on the street? One evening, his mother held his hand and said, "I see how you look at Emma." James felt his face grow warm. "What do you mean?" "You like her," Martha said with a weak smile. "I can tell." "Mom, she's just your nurse." "She's a good person, James. Beautiful on the inside where it counts." James knew his mother was right. Emma was kind, smart, and funny. In another life, if she didn't have those scars. That night, James couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about his promise to marry within 3 months. His mother was getting weaker. The doctor said she might not even have that long. Then an idea came to him. It was crazy, but it might work. The next day, James waited until Emma's shift ended. He found her in the parking lot. "Can I buy you dinner?" he asked. Emma looked confused. "Why?" "Because I enjoy talking to you," James said honestly. Emma studied his face. "Is this a joke? Did someone put you up to this?" "No," James said, surprised by her reaction. "I just want to have dinner with you." "People like you don't have dinner with people like me," Emma said quietly. "What does that mean?" "You know what it means, Mr. Parker. You're rich, successful, and," she gestured at his face, "and you look like that. I look like this, so I'll ask again. Why do you want to have dinner with me?" James had never been challenged like this before. Women usually said yes before he finished asking. "Because when I talk to you, I forget about everything else," he said. "I'm not Mr. Parker the billionaire. I'm just James." Emma looked at him for a long time. Finally, she said, "One dinner. But I pay for myself." Their dinner lasted 3 hours. Emma told James about growing up in a small town. She had 3 younger brothers. She loved spicy food but hated chocolate. She volunteered at a camp for children with burn injuries. James found himself laughing more than he had in years. Emma didn't laugh as much, but when she did, her whole face lit up, and James thought she looked beautiful in that moment. As he drove home, James knew what he needed to do. It was risky, maybe even crazy, but it could make his mother's final wish come true. He would ask Emma to marry him. James spent 3 more days thinking about how to ask Emma to marry him. He knew it was crazy. They had only known each other for a few weeks, but his mother was getting weaker every day. The doctor said she might only have a month left. He bought a ring, but not the kind he would have bought before. It was a simple gold band with a small diamond. Emma didn't seem like someone who would want a flashy ring. On Friday night, he took Emma to a quiet restaurant by the lake. The owner, an old friend, gave them a private table away from other people. James knew Emma didn't like when people stared at her. "This place is beautiful," Emma said, looking out at the water. The sunset turned the lake into a sheet of gold. James watched her. Even with the scars, her face showed every emotion so clearly. He could tell she was truly happy in this moment. "Emma," he said, suddenly nervous, "I need to ask you something." She turned to him, still smiling. "What is it?" James pulled out the small box and opened it. "Will you marry me?" Emma's smile disappeared. She looked at the ring, then at James, then back at the ring. "Is this a joke?" she asked, her voice very quiet. "No," James said. "I'm serious." "But why?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "We barely know each other. You can't possibly love me." James put the ring box on the table. "My mother doesn't have much time left. Her last wish is to see me married. I promised her I would find someone." Emma's face changed. She looked hurt, then angry. "So I'm just a way to keep a promise. You would marry me just to make your mother happy before she dies." "It's not like that," James said, but he knew it was exactly like that. "I like you, Emma. I enjoy being with you." "But you don't love me," Emma said. It wasn't a question. James didn't know what to say. She was right. He didn't love her, but he thought maybe someday he could. "We could make it work," he said. "I would be good to you. I would give you anything you want." Emma stood up. "I don't want your things, James. I don't care about your money." She picked up her purse. "I'm sorry about your mother. I truly am. But I can't marry someone who doesn't love me." She walked out of the restaurant, leaving James sitting alone with the ring. For 3 days, Emma avoided James at the hospital. She switched to working in a different area. James felt terrible. He had hurt her, and that was the last thing he wanted to do. On the 4th day, his mother asked, "Where is Emma? I miss her." James couldn't lie to his mother. "I asked her to marry me, and she said no." Martha's eyes widened. "You did what?" "Oh, James, did you ask because of my wish?" James nodded slowly. "Oh, my dear boy." Martha took his hand. "That's not what I wanted. I wanted you to find someone you love, not to trick a kind girl into a marriage without love." "But your time is running out," James said, his voice breaking. "I want to make you happy." "I am happy, knowing you care so much," Martha said. "But you must fix this. Apologize to Emma. She deserves better." That afternoon, James waited outside the hospital for Emma's shift to end. When she came out, she tried to walk past him. "Please, just give me 2 minutes," James said. Emma stopped but didn't look at him. "I'm sorry," James said. "You were right. I was being selfish. I thought I could make my mother happy without thinking about your feelings." Emma finally looked at him. Apology accepted. "Goodbye, James." "Wait," James said. "I have a new offer." Emma raised her eyebrows. "Marry me for 1 year," James said. "After my mother passes, if you want to leave, you can. I'll give you $5 million. You could start that burn camp you talked about. You could help a lot of children." Emma stared at him. "You're trying to buy me now." "No, I'm offering a deal that could help us both," James said. "My mother gets her wish. You get money to help others. And maybe, just maybe, we might find something real together." Emma was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "I have one condition." "Anything," James said. "You must never ask about my past or how I got these scars until 1 year has passed. Not one question. Do you agree?" James was surprised by this request, but he nodded. "I agree." "Then yes," Emma said. "I will marry you." James and Emma got married 3 days later in Martha's hospital room. It was a simple ceremony. Only the doctor, 2 nurses, and a hospital chaplain were there to watch. Emma wore a plain blue dress, not a wedding gown. James wore a regular suit, not a tuxedo. When the chaplain said, "You may kiss the bride," James gently kissed Emma's cheek, careful not to touch her scars. He felt her stiffen at his touch. Martha cried happy tears. She held Emma's hands and said, "Thank you for making my son happy. Please take care of each other." Emma smiled at Martha. "I will do my best." That night, James took Emma to his big house. Her eyes grew wide when she saw it. "This place is huge," she said. "Do you really need all this space?" James felt a bit embarrassed. "I guess not. I just bought what I thought a successful man should have." Emma walked from room to room. There were 10 bedrooms, 12 bathrooms, a movie theater, a gym, and a swimming pool. Everything was expensive and perfect. "Where will I sleep?" Emma asked. "You can have any room you want," James said. "I had the staff prepare the blue bedroom for you. It has its own bathroom. My room is down the hall if you need anything." Emma looked relieved. James realized she had been worried they would share a room. Of course, this wasn't a real marriage. The next morning, James got up early for work. He was surprised to find Emma in the kitchen, cooking breakfast. "You don't have to do that," James said. "We have a cook who comes in." "I like cooking," Emma said. "It helps me think." She put a plate of eggs and toast in front of him. "I quit my job at the hospital yesterday." "You didn't have to do that," James said. "It would be strange to work there now, don't you think? The billionaire's wife working as a nurse." James hadn't thought about that. "What will you do all day?" Emma sat down across from him with her own plate. "I thought I would start planning the burn camp. You said you would give me money for it." "Of course," James said. "I'll have my assistant set up an account for you today." For 2 weeks, they lived like polite roommates. Emma cooked meals and spent time with Martha at the hospital. James worked long hours and came home late. They barely saw each other. Then one evening, James came home to find Emma crying in the living room. She quickly wiped her tears when she saw him. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Your mother had a bad day," Emma said. "The doctors say she may only have a week left." James sat down heavily on the couch. He had known this was coming, but it still hit him hard. Emma sat beside him. "I'm sorry, James." Without thinking, James reached for her hand. Emma didn't pull away. They sat in silence for a long time. The next day, James didn't go to work. He went to the hospital with Emma. Martha was asleep when they arrived. She looked so small in the hospital bed. "She's been asking for both of you," the nurse said. James and Emma sat on either side of Martha's bed, each holding one of her hands. When she woke up, Martha smiled weakly. "My 2 favorite people," she whispered. "Are you happy, James?" James looked at Emma across the bed. To his surprise, he realized he wasn't unhappy. Having Emma in his house had made it feel less empty. Knowing she was there when he came home gave him a sense of peace he hadn't felt before. "Yes, Mom," he said. "I'm happy." Martha smiled and closed her eyes again. "Good. That's all I wanted." For the next 5 days, James and Emma barely left the hospital. They took turns sleeping in the chair next to Martha's bed. They ate bad hospital food. They talked to her even when she was asleep. On the 6th day, while Emma was getting coffee, Martha opened her eyes and looked at James. "Promise me something," she said, her voice barely audible. "Anything," James said, leaning close. "Give this marriage a real chance," Martha said. "Emma is special. Look with your heart, not your eyes." Before James could answer, Martha closed her eyes. The machines around her started to beep loudly. Doctors and nurses rushed in. But it was too late. Martha Parker was gone. After Martha's funeral, a strange quiet fell over James's big house. He took 2 weeks off work. Most days, he just sat in his office, staring at nothing. He missed his mother more than he thought possible. Emma gave him space, but she made sure he ate. She left food outside his door when he didn't come down for meals. At night, James would find her sitting in the living room, reading. Sometimes he joined her, and they sat in comfortable silence. 1 month after Martha died, James went back to work. His company had managed without him, but he needed something to do with his days. The empty house reminded him too much of his loss. When he came home that first day back, he smelled something delicious. He followed the smell to the kitchen. Emma was cooking, wearing an apron over her simple dress. "Welcome home," she said with a small smile. "I made your favorite, steak with mushroom sauce." "How did you know that's my favorite?" James asked, surprised. "Your mother told me. She said you used to ask for it every birthday." James felt a lump in his throat. "Thank you," he managed to say. During dinner, Emma told James about her day. She had been working on plans for the burn camp. She had found land by a lake that would be perfect. "I was thinking we could call it Martha's Place," Emma said, "to honor your mother." James put down his fork, touched by her thoughtfulness. She would have liked that. After dinner, they watched a movie together for the first time. Emma sat at one end of the couch, James at the other. It was a comedy, and James was surprised to hear Emma laugh. Her whole face lit up when she laughed, and for a moment, James forgot about her scars. As weeks passed, James and Emma fell into a routine. They had breakfast together before James went to work. In the evenings, they shared dinner and talked about their days. Sometimes, they watched movies or read books in the same room. James's friends were curious about his mysterious new wife. They had not been invited to the wedding. Many had not even known James was dating anyone. "You need to bring her to dinner," said Michael, James's oldest friend. "All this secrecy makes people talk." So James asked Emma if she would go to dinner at Michael's house. Emma looked nervous. "Will there be many people?" she asked. "Just Michael and his wife, and maybe one other couple," James said. "They're my friends. They won't be rude about." He didn't finish the sentence, but they both knew he meant her scars. The night of the dinner, Emma took extra time getting ready. When she came downstairs, James was surprised. She had done something different with her makeup. It didn't hide her scars, but somehow they seemed less noticeable. She wore a blue dress that matched her eyes. "You look nice," James said, and he meant it. At Michael's house, James could see his friends trying not to stare at Emma's face. Michael's wife, Sarah, was especially kind, showing Emma around their home. During dinner, Michael asked, "So, Emma, how did you and James meet?" "At the hospital," Emma said simply. "I was a nurse taking care of his mother." "And it was love at first sight?" asked Sarah with a smile. Emma looked at James. He could see uncertainty in her eyes. "Not exactly," James said, taking Emma's hand under the table. "But sometimes the best things grow slowly." Emma squeezed his hand, and James felt something shift between them. For the first time, their marriage felt less like a business deal and more like something real. On the drive home, Emma was quiet. Finally, she said, "Thank you for what you said at dinner." "I meant it," James replied, surprising himself. That night, James couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Emma, about how her hand had felt in his, about how she remembered the small things his mother had told her, about how she never complained about her scars or used them as an excuse. With a start, James realized he was falling in love with his wife. The thought both thrilled and terrified him. 5 months had passed since James and Emma got married. Their big house felt more like a home now. Emma had added small touches, plants in the windows, colorful pillows on the couch, and family photos on the walls. James liked the changes. They made the cold, perfect rooms feel warm and lived in. One evening, James came home early from work. He wanted to surprise Emma with tickets to a play she had mentioned wanting to see. He called her name, but no one answered. She must be out, he thought. James went upstairs to change his clothes. As he passed Emma's bedroom, he noticed her door was slightly open. She was usually very careful about closing it. Curious, he peeked inside. The room was empty, but something caught his eye. A drawer in Emma's desk was open, and he could see the corner of a photo album. James knew he shouldn't look. Emma was entitled to her privacy, but he remembered her one condition, that he never ask about her past or her scars for 1 year. She hadn't said he couldn't look. Before he could change his mind, James slipped into the room and pulled out the album. He opened it and gasped. Inside were photos of a beautiful woman, a woman with no scars. She had long dark hair and perfect skin. Her smile was dazzling. In some photos, she wore fancy dresses and posed for cameras. In others, She was on beaches or at parties with famous people James recognized. At first, James thought this must be a relative of Emma's. But then he looked closer at the woman's eyes. They were the same unusual blue-gray as Emma's. This was Emma before the accident that scarred her. With shaking hands, James turned the pages. There were magazine covers with Emma's face on them. Headlines called her the face of the decade and fashion's golden girl. One article was titled, "Sophia Lee Takes Paris by Storm." Sophia Lee, was that Emma's real name? James quickly put the album back when he heard the front door open. He hurried out of Emma's room and down the stairs, his mind racing. "James, you're home early," Emma said with a smile when she saw him. She was carrying grocery bags. "Let me help you with those," James said, taking the bags. He tried to act normal, but his heart was pounding. "Are you okay?" Emma asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," James lied. "Just a hard day at work." That night, James couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the photos. Emma, or Sophia, had been famous. A model, it seemed. What had happened to her? Why was she working as a nurse? Why did she keep her past a secret? The next day, James called his friend Robert, who worked for a private investigation company. "I need information about someone named Sophia Lee," James said. "She was a model about 5 years ago." "This will cost you," Robert warned. "Money is not a problem," James replied. 3 days later, Robert sent James a file. James locked himself in his office to read it. Sophia Lee had been one of the highest-paid models in the world. She had lived in New York, Paris, and Milan. She had dated famous actors and musicians. Then, 5 years ago, she was in a terrible car accident. Her car had caught fire, leaving her badly burned. After months in the hospital, she disappeared from public life. The fashion world moved on without her. The file included news articles about the accident. One headline read, "Beauty Queen's Career Over After Disfiguring Accident." Another showed a photo of Sophia before the accident with the cruel title, "From Gorgeous to Grotesque: Sophia Lee's Tragic Fall." There was more. After the accident, Sophia's boyfriend, a famous actor, had broken up with her. Her modeling agency had dropped her. Most of her so-called friends had stopped calling. James felt sick reading this. He thought about how kind Emma was, despite everything she had lost. How she never complained or felt sorry for herself. How she used her experience to help others with similar injuries. That evening, when Emma asked why he was so quiet, James almost told her what he had discovered. But he remembered their agreement. No questions about her past for 1 year. He had already broken her trust by looking through her things and hiring an investigator. He wouldn't make it worse by confronting her. Instead, he said, "I was just thinking about how lucky I am to have you in my life." Emma looked surprised, then pleased. "That's a nice thought," she said softly. Over the next month, James looked at Emma differently. Now that he knew her secret, he noticed small things he had missed before. The way she held herself when they went out in public, back straight, head high, like someone used to being washed. The way she could put on makeup with perfect, practiced strokes. The way she knew about fashion and art, things a small-town nurse might not know much about. But James also noticed how Emma never looked in mirrors longer than she had to. How she flinched when children stared at her scars. How she wore high-necked clothes to hide the burn marks that must extend down her neck and chest. James wanted to tell Emma that he knew about her past, that it didn't matter to him, that he thought she was brave and strong, but he had promised not to ask about her scars for 1 year. Their 1-year anniversary was still 4 months away. One day, James came home with a surprise. "Pack a bag," he told Emma. "We're going on a trip." Emma looked confused. "A trip? Where? Why?" "It's a surprise," James said with a smile. "Just pack for warm weather." The next morning, James's private plane took them to a small island in the Caribbean. James owned the island, but had never visited it before. There was one house on the beach, staffed by a small team who lived on the other side of the island. When they arrived, Emma stared at the crystal clear water and white sand with wonder. "This is beautiful," she said. "Do you own this?" James nodded. "I bought it years ago as an investment. I've never even been here until now." "Why not?" Emma asked. James thought about it. "I guess I never had anyone to share it with before." The house was simpler than their mansion back home, but still very nice. It had big windows that looked out at the ocean. There was a large deck where they could eat meals outside. For the first 2 days, they swam in the warm water, walked on the beach, and read books under umbrellas on the sand. James noticed that Emma always wore long-sleeved swim shirts and pants, even in the hot sun. She was still hiding her scars. On the 3rd day, James woke up early and found Emma already sitting on the beach. She was looking at an old photo on her phone. From a distance, James could see it was a picture of her before the accident, before she was scared. Without thinking, James sat down beside her. "You were beautiful," he said softly. Emma quickly turned off her phone. "What?" "In your old life. As Sophia Lee. You were beautiful." Emma's face went pale. "You know," she whispered. "How long have you known?" "A while now," James admitted. "I found your photo album. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have looked." Emma stood up, her hands shaking. "You broke your promise. You said you wouldn't ask about my past." "I didn't ask," James said. "I found out on my own. I'm sorry, Emma. Or do you prefer Sophia?" "Don't call me that," Emma said sharply. "Sophia died in that car crash. She's gone." "Why didn't you tell me?" James asked gently. "Did you think I would treat you differently if I knew you were once famous?" Emma laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Everyone treats me differently once they know. They either feel sorry for me or they get weird about it. Oh, how terrible to lose your beauty." As if that was the worst part of the accident. "What was the worst part?" James asked. Emma sat down again, looking out at the ocean. "Losing myself. For years, I was just my face, my body. I was what people saw on magazine covers. When that was gone, I had to figure out who I really was." James took her hand. To his surprise, she didn't pull away. "And who are you?" he asked. Emma turned to look at him. "I'm still figuring that out, but I think I'm someone who helps others. Someone who sees past the surface. Someone who might be falling in love with her fake husband." James felt his heart jump. "Emma." "I wasn't going to tell you," Emma said quickly. "I know our marriage isn't real. I know you married me for your mother, and that in a few months, we'll go our separate ways. But this trip, being here with you, it's made me feel things I didn't think I could feel again." James moved closer to her. "What if I don't want it to end in a few months?" he asked. "What if I want our marriage to be real?" Emma stared at James. "Do you really mean that? Or are you just feeling sorry for me now that you know my story?" "I don't feel sorry for you," James said. "I admire you. You lost everything and started over. You help others instead of feeling bitter. You're the strongest person I know." Emma looked away. The sun was setting, turning the sky pink and orange. "There's more to my story," she said quietly. "Things you still don't know." "Tell me," James said. "I want to know everything about you." Emma took a deep breath. "My scars. They're not as bad as they look." James was confused. "What do you mean?" "Most of my burns healed years ago," Emma explained. "I had good doctors. They did skin grafts. It was painful, but it worked. The scars you see now, most of them aren't real." "I don't understand," James said. Emma reached into her pocket and pulled out a small container. "This is special makeup. It's what movie studios use to make fake scars and wounds. I learned how to apply it from a makeup artist I met during my recovery." James was shocked. "You've been wearing fake scars. But why?" "After my accident, I lost everything," Emma said. my career, my friends, my boyfriend. They all left when I wasn't beautiful anymore. It showed me how shallow my life had been, how people only valued me for my looks. She looked at James. When I met your mother, I loved her right away. She was so kind to me, even though I was just her nurse. Then I met you. You were handsome, rich, successful. The kind of man who would never look twice at someone like me, someone scared and ordinary. That's not true, James started to say, but Emma held up her hand. Let me finish. When your mother told me how much she wanted you to get married, I had an idea. I would make my scars look worse than they really were. I would see if you could love someone for who they are inside, not for their appearance. It was wrong of me to trick you. I'm sorry. James didn't know what to say. He felt confused, angry, and curious all at once. So, what do you really look like? He finally asked. Emma stood up. Wait here. She walked back to the house. James sat on the beach, his mind racing. Had their whole marriage been built on a lie? Yet hadn't he also been dishonest? He had married her to make his mother happy, not because he loved her. 20 minutes later, Emma returned. James turned to look at her and gasped. The woman walking toward him was still Emma. He could tell by her eyes. The way she walked, the way she held her hands together nervously. But her face was different. The twisted scars were gone. Her skin was mostly smooth, with only a few thin lines near her hairline and along her jaw. She was beautiful, but in a real way, not the perfect magazine cover beauty from the photos he had seen. This is the real me, Emma said softly. I still have some scars, but they're not bad. I've been adding the fake ones every day since we met. James stood up and walked to her. Gently, he touched her face, tracing the places where the fake scars had been. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I was afraid, Emma admitted. At first, I was just testing you, seeing if you could look past appearance. But then I started to care for you. I was afraid you'd be angry when you found out I lied. Or worse, that you'd only want me once you knew I wasn't really ugly. Emma, James said, taking her hands. I fell in love with you before I knew any of this. I fell in love with your kindness, your strength, your mind. That's who you really are. The rest is just packaging. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I've been so afraid of being loved only for my looks again, of being nothing more than a pretty face. You could never be just a pretty face to me, James said. You're the woman who made my house a home, who remembered what my favorite food was, who wanted to name a camp after my mother. That's the person I love. Emma looked up at him with hope in her eyes. So what happens now? James didn't answer Emma's question right away. Instead, he started to laugh. Emma looked hurt until he explained. I hired a private investigator to learn about your past, he admitted. I found out who you were months ago, but by then, I had already fallen in love with you. Scars and all. Real or fake, they didn't matter to me. Emma's eyes widened. You knew, and you didn't say anything. I promised not to ask about your past, James said with a smile. I kept that promise. For a moment, Emma was silent. Then she started laughing too. We're quite a pair, aren't we? Both of us keeping secrets, both of us pretending. They walked along the beach as the stars came out. The warm breeze blew around them. James held Emma's hand, marveling at how right it felt. I have a confession too, James said. When I first asked you to marry me, it was only for my mother. I didn't think about your feelings. I was selfish, and I agreed to marry you partly because I wanted to test if someone could love me despite my appearance, Emma said. I was using you too. So we both started this marriage for the wrong reasons, James said, but something real grew from it. They stopped walking and faced each other. The moon was bright enough that James could see Emma's face clearly, her real face, with just the few small scars that remained from her accident. I love you, Emma, James said simply. Not Sophia the model, not Emma the nurse with the scars. Just you, whoever you want to be. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I love you too, James. Not the billionaire. Not the dutiful son. Just you. The man who learns to cook because I was tired one day. The man who remembers the little things I say. The man who sees me. James gently wiped away her tears. So what happens now? We're already married. Should we get married again? For real this time? Emma smiled. I think we should start over. From the beginning. She stepped back and held out her hand. Hello, I'm Emily. I used to be a famous model named Sophia, but now I help burn victims and children who have been hurt. I have some scars, both inside and out, and I'm falling in love with you. James took her hand. Hello, Emily. I'm James Parker. I own a tech company and too many houses. I was lonely until I met you, and I'm already in love with you. They renewed their vows right there on the beach, with only the stars as witnesses. James promised to love Emma for who she was inside. Emma promised to never hide her true self again. When they returned home, Emma threw away her special effects makeup. She didn't need it anymore. Some days she wore regular makeup to cover her remaining scars, and some days she didn't. James thought she was beautiful either way. Emma started her burn camp, calling it Martha's Haven. She used James's technology company to develop new treatments for burn victims. Sometimes she visited patients wearing some of her old scar makeup, showing them that beauty comes in many forms and that scars don't define a person. James sold his giant mansion. They bought a smaller house by the lake, closer to the camp. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm and full of love. James worked less and spent more time helping at the camp. He discovered he enjoyed working with the children. 1 year after their beach vows, Emma gave birth to a baby girl. They named her Martha, after James's mother. When Martha was born, James cried with joy. He had everything his mother had wished for him, a family built on love and honesty. As Martha grew, James and Emma taught her that true beauty comes from kindness, courage, and truth. They told her the story of how they met, and how sometimes love grows in the strangest ways. The most important things can't be seen with the eyes. Emma would tell little Martha, quoting her favorite book, they can only be seen with the heart. And James, watching his wife and daughter together, knew this was the truest thing in the world.